So hello and a very, very warm welcome to the main shrine room at the London Buddhist Centre, everybody. So let's see who we've got. We've got obviously Subhuti. Nina, you're here from New York. Hooray!
Hooray, Nina. Yeah.
Todd, hello from Clapham. Less glamorous than New York, but Todd is American. Robert Rowe from Southwark. And some of them are moving too fast. There's Eloise from Hertfordshire. Hello, Eloise. Hopefully I pronounced that properly. Eloise. And Miriam from Donegal in Ireland.
Hooray! Yeah.
And Stephen from Bow. Not so exciting, but never mind, Stephen. Still good that you're here. And Trista, possibly Trist, from Trieste. That's great, lovely.
From where?
From Trieste.
From Trieste. Mm.
That's very good, isn't it? And Simon Shinnery says, delighted to be here. James from Battersea. Hello, James. And Ruby from Hackney. You're all tuning in. That's very good.
Yeah, good.
And Sarvajit's here again. And Jane from Cambridge, Sarvajit and Jane.
Yeah. And
Amla Vajra is tuning in from the Dharma Prasada community in Brixton.
Hooray! Raising money all the time.
And I still haven't been to Dharma Prasada, but I'm told it's massive. It's massive and very luxurious. So I hope you're enjoying your community, Amla Vajra. And who else is here? Patrick from Clapton. Lights in the Sky Films say hello from Islington. So that's probably Surya Prabha.
Oh, Surya Prabha. Hello, Surya Prabha.
The view miss you, Surya Prabha. And who else from, is it said from Norfolk? And Andrew Ravenscroft. Hello, Andrew. And he says, thanks, Subhuti, for the morning meditation.
Oh, good.
Very good. So very good that you're all tuning in. Presumably, many of you have been tuning in each night, and obviously some of you in the mornings as well, which is great. Really, really good. Very, very good. I've been sort of watching on catch up when I can. I haven't been tuning in live very much. And JV from Belgium. And Rachel from Hackney, actually. Rob Penderton, who says hello to Peter Milton, who is here from Stockholm. So hello, Peter, and hello, Rob. Debbie Rees. Okay, so look, I've been pointed to the clock by Italy. And I must say, so my name is Jnanavaca, so welcome to all of you. I must say that I'm joined in the shrine room here at the London Buddhist Centre by my community, Samajivasa community. So there's lots of us here, but we're all living together, so that's all very good. And of course, I'm joined by Subhuti. So yes, I'll say a little bit of introduction, not very much for Subhuti, and then I'll hand over to him. And then tonight, we're going to be looking at spiritual death, the aspect of a system of practice called spiritual death. Subhuti's already been talking about integration with Dharma Yuta and positive emotion with Pranyamanas and spiritual receptivity with the Shantikara. And we move on now to the stage or the aspect of practice called spiritual death. So that's what I'm going to be talking to Subhuti about. But first of all, I just want to say from me, I know Subhuti has been welcomed by others, but I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be talking with Subhuti. To even just have you virtually here is a boon, actually. Subhuti is, probably most of you are getting to know Subhuti, and some of you will know Subhuti very well. As others have been saying, Subhuti's been so foundational, key to the London Buddhist Centre, not just the London Buddhist Centre actually. He's been so important in many aspects of our order and movement. He's taken up so much responsibility in our order and movement and continues to do so, including in India. Subhuti spends half his time when he can, which he's not been able to do of late, this year. When he can, he's been spending half his time in India. People may not know, but over a third of our order is in India, Subhuti.
Something like that, yeah.
Like a third of our order, and many, many more people who have asked to join our order are in India. It won't be too many years before the majority of our order is in India. So Subhuti spending time both in India and in the West is performing a really important function in making sure that our order is united across those two great cultures. And but at the LBC, at the London Buddhist Centre, Subhuti was, he helped find the building that the London Buddhist Centre is. Perhaps he found it himself, and he certainly led the team of people that converted an old burnt-out fire station to the Buddhist Centre that we have. So over 40 years ago, Subhuti was on a building site for 2 and a bit years, working on joists and I don't know, that's about the limit of my building experience. Apparently there was dry rot and all sorts of other things. But the very, very fabric of this place, the walls, the floor, the shrine, all of that, Subhuti was intimately involved in, as well as, of course, I live in a community above the London Buddhist Centre, and that's where Subhuti and others would have lived while they were converting the building. Heroic kind of work. It was sort of pre the days when you could have building control and all of that sort of thing. So thankfully, a bunch of, as it were, amateurs. I mean, you were an amateur, weren't you, Subhuti, as a builder?
Yes. Yeah.
Managed to do this incredible project for which many of us, hundreds, thousands of us, and myself included, have been benefiting. But more than that, I want to talk about Subhuti as a friend. He's Shantikara and others have talked about the function of a president. He's president of the LBC. But I particularly want to just talk about Subhuti as a friend in the Dharma, a Kalyana Mitra. He's a remarkable friend to many, many, many people. He's extremely loyal as a friend. To me, he's been he's a friend and a teacher. He ordained me 21 years ago. So he welcomed me into the order. He gave me the name Jnanavaca. The ordination ceremony was in India, so he hosted the retreat that I was on, where I got ordained. He led that retreat. And well, if you're not ordained, maybe we'll talk a little bit about ordination. If you're not ordained, it might seem melodramatic, but I mean it very sort of sincerely when I say that's the most life-changing, important event in my Dharma life, that ordination. So when somebody ordains you, when Subhuti has ordained me, it creates a bond, a relationship that goes beyond the word friend as we normally understand friendship. It even goes beyond the word teacher, which perhaps comes closer at times. But there's a spiritual bond that is created, which I remain profoundly grateful for and profoundly grateful to Subhuti. More than that, he's also a friend in many other ways. He's helped me on my spiritual path, often through challenging me, certainly through encouraging me. He's not, what would I say? He's always stimulating, not always easy. You never quite know what Subhuti's going to come up with. But I always feel my life is enriched by my contact with Subhuti. And even when we're not in contact, somewhere in my psyche, in my mental world, I feel that we are. So I feel very, very grateful to Subhuti. And I'm not the only one who has that sort of relationship with Subhuti. I know many, many people all over our order and movement, all over the world, feel profound gratitude to Subhuti. I won't say very much more, although I could do, but I want to hand over to Subhuti now who will lead us in a short meditation, and then we'll together, I'll interview Subhuti and ask him more about spiritual death. So welcome to all of you. Welcome, Subhuti, and over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Jnanavaca, and good evening, or whatever the time of day it is where you are, to everybody who's come here. So we're going to just sit. I don't think this is the occasion to do any sort of deeper practice, but it's the opportunity for us to come present and to be aware of each other. You can see Jnanavaca, you can see me on the screen, but well, there's 100 or more other people tuning in at the same time. So if one thinks of it, all those consciousnesses are united. The medium of the screen of the electrons or whatever it is that makes it all happen is simply adventitious. It's just incidental. What's really important is that our consciousnesses are coinciding in this particular moment. So while we're sitting in silence, let's just reflect on that we're all drawn together in this common awareness. So make yourself comfortable. If you want to, close your eyes. Be aware of what state you're in, how you're feeling. If there's any residue from the day, just let it go. And as best you can, be aware of 100 or more people gathered here in awareness. All these minds gathered. We may not be able to meet, but in the flesh, that is, but we can meet mentally, not just through the virtual screen, but through our consciousness of each other, of all being present together. And when you're ready, open your eyes and bring your attention to the screen in front of you. But try to keep some feeling of this community of consciousness that's gathered here. And I'll hand over to Jnanavaca.
And if you haven't been tuning in on previous evenings, this evening will stand alone, but do see if you want to catch up on what Subhuti had to say on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday about integration, positive emotional, skillful intention, and spiritual receptivity. Tonight, I'm going to be asking Subhuti about what Bhante Sankaracharita has termed spiritual death. And we'll follow the usual format. So I'll ask Subhuti some questions, draw him out. At 7:45 or so, we'll have a 5-minute break. And we'll come back and continue the conversation for a little bit. But there'll also be time in the second half for you to post questions on the chat and then see what Subhuti has to say. But wait till the second half, because the questions might be lost on the chat if you post them too early. Okay, so very good. So shall we begin, Subhuti, on spiritual death?
Please, let's launch in.
So I was thinking that with integration, positive emotion, and spiritual receptivity, even somebody a bit unfamiliar to Buddhism, probably even without listening to you, has a vague idea of what those terms mean.
Yeah.
They're sort of understandable terms in our language, in our colloquial speech. But spiritual death doesn't seem to be like that. We are treading into deeper terrain, I think, into deeper waters, and possibly, people might think that they know what it is, and it's possible to mistake it. So I wondered if you could say a little bit about, to start us off with, what spiritual death is, and possibly what it isn't as well. The words are very strong, aren't they? Spiritual death, death. So it'd be good to say what we mean.
Yes. Well, as you're speaking, it immediately occurred to me that the word death is so important. You got a little bit of a laugh when you said death with a particular tone. But it's quite useful to think that spiritual death, the phase of spiritual death, is really accepting death. It's really accepting that you are going to die. All of us know we're going to die, but we live as if we were going to live forever. But if you are really dying spiritually, you've recognized that death is on its way. And once you've recognized that death is on its way, it alters your relationship to life. Either you live desperately trying to get whatever drops of pleasure you can from life, or you despair, or you fully embrace death and you recognize that there's something more, something beyond. So I thought it was useful just to think of the term death itself and see why that is evoked. But it's the stage of spiritual death is the stage at which you finally recognize that there is no permanent fixed I, that you do not exist as some sort of part of the eternal structure of things. It's simply a temporary process. You are a temporary process that is ever changing, that's never static, and that ultimately passes away. It gives rise to something new. Under the law of karma, a new birth will take place, but it's not exactly you in the new life. So at the stage of spiritual death, you fully accept that, you fully realize that there is no fixed self-identity.
mm,
And furthermore, you recognize that that fixed idea of yourself stands in the way of something far greater and far more worthwhile,
mm,
and that gives life its true meaning.
mm,
So the stage of spiritual death is the stage at which you get out of the way,
mm,
could say, of the Dharma.
mm,
You get out of the way, and
mm,
you open up to the forces that come from the depths of reality.
mm, mm. So would you say that without recognizing that there is something more that you're opening up to, that it's not spiritual death? I say that
Yes.
because a lot of us, well, a lot of people will have come to terms with their own mortality
Yes. Yeah.
without necessarily feeling that there's something more.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I think in a way you can't come to terms with your own mortality without recognizing that there's something more. I'd say paradoxically, you can theoretically come to terms with it, but
Yes,
to fully embrace it
yes,
requires one to, as it were, step beyond death,
yeah,
and to recognize something beyond death.
yeah,
So yes, I think unless one has done that, one's contemplation of death, one's recognition of death, if it goes to any depth at all, simply leads to as I say, a sort of desperate clinging on to what
mm,
shreds of pleasure you can grab,
mm,
or it leads to a despair, even depression. So I think lots of people have understood that they're going to die, but they
yes.
haven't really embraced it.
And similarly, I guess a lot of people at one level will have understood that they're not a fixed and separate entity. That I guess modern psychology would say that self is a
Yes.
construct and we're an amalgam of
Yes. Yeah.
etc. That's not the same thing
No.
as what you're talking about, though.
It's a good step. It's
Right,
a good first step
right,
to recognize, as it were, theoretically, that
right,
you are not something fixed.
right.
And anybody who's done any physiology will know that, and as you say, any psychology will know that.
Mm, mm,
But it's a matter of actually experiencing that.
mm, mm,
You could say, in a way, it's experiencing that you are more than you. Although that's too paradoxical, isn't it? Because it's not really you, but that your consciousness or consciousness is it expands beyond
mm,
the identification with all those conditioned processes,
mm, 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 mm,
which are mutable and finally extinguished at death.
mm, mm, mm. It's interesting, you picking up or you starting with looking at physical death,
Yes.
actual death of the body, and then linking that to realizing that we're not a fixed and separate entity.
Yes.
So would it be possible if somebody's, what am I trying to say? If somebody is convinced that physical death, the death of the body, is the end of consciousness,
Hmm.
would it be possible for them to realize spiritual death in the second way, where they realize that they're not a fixed and separate entity?
Well, I think that if they did have that realization, it would take them beyond their belief that death was the end of life. It would take them beyond their materialism, because
No.
they'd experience something about consciousness that is not destructible. Uh, Something very, very, very fundamental to what awareness is not destructible. So if people have all sorts of views, and despite those views, they can have experiences that deny those views. So that might be something that happened. But if somebody is really determined that they're materialist, that there is nothing but this life, it all ends at death, they probably won't sort of accept experiences that point beyond that. They'll have got some inner discourse that tells them that's superstition, that's avoidance, that's an opiate. It's a way of palliating the problems of life. But
Yeah.
yes, our views do substantially determine our experience, but they don't completely.
Right.
And there's something about life itself that is bigger than our views, and that sometimes can burst through despite us.
Mm, mm, mm. And again, it's interesting, isn't it, that one can sincerely and effectively practice the stage of integration and
Yeah.
skillful intention, and even maybe to some degree receptivity, spiritual receptivity,
Hmm.
without being confronted by the limitations of views. But this
Yeah.
aspect of spiritual death, our
Yeah.
views are somehow very, very key to
Yes.
a genuine experience of spiritual death.
Yes.
So I
I,
wonder whether you would say something about views. You've
right.
talked a little bit, well, you've touched on materialism and
Yes.
how our experience can sometimes, in a way, contradict our views, but, that we could
Yeah.
even then
Yeah.
somehow use the view to discount the experience.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
one way in which the views get in the way, I guess.
Yes.
But I wondered if you could say something about views, their place in the Dharma life.
Yes. Well, their place in life itself. But
Right.
before I go on to that, I should say that, of course, the integration, positive emotion, and spiritual receptivity,
Mm.
if they're taken far enough,
Mm.
go all the way
Right.
to Buddhahood. But
Yes.
yes, they can be relatively easily engaged with at a basic human level.
Yeah.
Uh, that's what you're saying.
Yes.
But it's important to remember that integration, true integration, is integration with reality.
Yeah.
It's integration with Buddhahood, with the Dhamma, etc.
Yeah.
So yes, the role of views. Um, we interpret the world. That's the function of our intellect, our concepts, and so forth. They try to make sense of the world for our better survival, for our better thriving.
Mm.
It's a distinctive human faculty, isn't it? The production of an idea about what's going on,
Mm.
and to create a story about it.
Mm.
This is happening because of that,
Yeah.
and so forth. And these views can be very productive.
Yeah.
They can enable us to gain freedom.
Mm.
And these are the views that we're trying to explore right now.
Yeah.
If we had a really good, clear understanding of spiritual death, that could be of great benefit to us immediately in our
Right.
lives, whether or not we're realizing that fully.
Mm.
But equally, ideas that are contrary to that can have a very strong closing effect.
Yeah.
So, for instance, we've mentioned materialism, which is probably the commonest view
Mm.
of our times, and even those who are nominally religious are, when you don't need to scrape the surface much, but you scrape the surface, you find they're thoroughgoing materialists, thoroughly bought into the materialist religion of consumerism,
Mm.
the most effective religion there's ever been. It always produces another iPad.
Mm.
But
I've just been shopping online before. Anyway, never mind.
you see, it works. But yes, the way in which you look at the world, the way in which you understand the world, it really determines the effect that you have in the world, and the effect the world has on you.
Mm.
So if you're a materialist, you just dismiss anything that is otherworldly, as it were, beyond this world, beyond this life. You just won't look, and you're not open. So
Mm.
even if experiences come, and they do, because they always do, reality leaks in all the time, whether you like it or not. But we're defended by the views that we construct,
Mm.
which protect us from the true nature of things.
Yeah.
So you see it with people that I've noticed it particularly with people who have a bereavement. You know,
Mm.
after the bereavement, they're very, very open.
Yes.
Suddenly see something about life
Yeah.
far more, and I've often had people come to me and say, I've had people come to me and say, I've really seen, I just want to now dedicate myself to spiritual life. And it can be as little as a week later, they've even forgotten they said that, because the old habitual interpretations of reality come back and close us down. So a lot of our work, especially if you like, at this stage, is on clarifying views and getting rid of wrong views. And we carry so many, and there are so many in the culture around us, which is predominantly materialist in its perspective. Although, of course, there is a strain of theism, which has its own problems. You know, I can have some sympathy with those who believe in God, as long as they're not too dogmatized about it. One can sense that they're talking about something that's familiar to one. But I wouldn't use that language. I don't think that's a helpful language, because it shapes the way in which you experience. So, for instance, you may think that it's all in the hands of God. So that means you don't make any effort. Now, there's a sense in which that may become true, but not in the early stages, when you really haven't mastered your self-responsibility and so on. So yes, views are extremely important in our lives, and it's one of our major functions in teaching the Dhamma and in engaging with the Dhamma ourselves, is to clarify views, clarify our own views, and to be very aware of the views that are around us. I mean, like everybody, I'm trying not to be addicted to watching the American election. And what I find particularly interesting about it is tracing all the views that go on within it. And you know, you can see something you sympathize with, but then the view which surrounds that is problematic. You know, there's many topical issues. There's the race question. I think there's a real question of race in our society. There's a real problem of race in our society. But a lot of the views that surround that on both sides actually make things worse. And so views need a very direct tackling and exploration, and especially when we're coming to think of a really deep self-transformation, as we are in talking about the 5 aspects of spiritual life.
In a sense, would I be right in saying that you could think of spiritual death in terms of, as it were, dying to unhelpful views? You know, at whatever level those views are, at the deepest level.
Yes.
A view of existence as a separate.
Yes.
Outward.
Yeah.
But unhelpful views at a less, perhaps less instinctive level as well.
Yeah. Yes. Views. God, sorry.
Other sorts of identity that we hold.
Yes, because we create our identity through views.
Yeah.
When we hold a view, that view, whatever it is, whether it's quite a superficial one or a quite deep one, it's all rooted in the idea of a permanent fixed I in a permanent real world, which is the reality is much more complex and mystical than that, mysterious than that. Yes, so I think that's absolutely right. And of course, in Buddhist tradition, this is represented by the breaking of the fetter of Satkaya Drishti, which is usually translated as the view of a true self. So when you break that, that really is a spiritual death. But it's not just break it in the theoretical sense, because views are not merely theories. They're deeply held attitudes that are often not formulated, and maybe even contrary to what we actually assert in our public life or in our conscious thinking.
So if in a way this aspect of the path is so central to the Dharma life, to the very notion of Buddhism, why is it that we don't perhaps introduce it when somebody first walks into the door? I mean, we talk a lot about integration and positive emotion. We may talk quite a lot about spiritual receptivity. We talk about, for example, as you've done, you know, receptivity to beauty, to the arts, to other people. But we don't Well, perhaps we do, but we're perhaps a bit more reticent about talking about letting go of the view that we exist as a fixed and separate selfhood.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I hope that's not entirely true,
Mm.
but perhaps there are reasons for caution.
I think we're getting at that
Yes.
what there's something particular about this, and I
Yeah.
wondered.
Yeah. If people are not integrated, then they're disintegrated, and if they're disintegrated, any sort of insight of this kind, even a theoretical insight of this kind, can further that disintegration. A lot of people come through the door not in particularly positive mental states, or in rather mixed states, and they don't have the basis for receiving this sort of understanding in a positive way. So they'll either yes, become despairing, or maybe become just thinking that they just need to enjoy themselves much more. So there needs to be some preparation for it. But I wouldn't say it's completely absent, I hope, from our training from the moment people come through the door. Look, here we are speaking about this, and there could be anybody listening. But talking about it is the beginning. In other words, we begin to introduce people to the fundamental Buddhist ideas. So they begin to look at their own views, to challenge their own views. So that's happening on one level. The other thing we're doing is we're drawing them into Kalyana Mitrata. And we're engaging with them in spiritual friendship. And in engaging in spiritual friendship, what begins to happen is that your own idea of yourself, your own habits, your own habitual patterns begin to get broken up. Hopefully, on the whole, in a very pleasant and cheerful sort of way, but sometimes a little more drastically. Yeah. And so that actually that is a little bit of spiritual death.
Right.
Yes. So I think that we don't sit people down and teach them the 6-element practice, which is, I won't tell you what it is, but it's our major or our basic practice of spiritual death. Emblematic practice of spiritual death. We deliberately don't teach that in open classes because we don't know how people are going to receive it. Actually, my very first retreat, led by Bhante Urgyen Sangharakshita, he taught that 6-element practice, and to some extent it's why I'm here now.
And look at you now.
Look at me now. But yes, it really appealed to me very strongly. But you can't rely on that. I have known people be really very freaked by that practice, and to have a sense, if they have a weak sense of identity, if you start undermining that weak sense of identity, you're just making them weaker. And so I think it's necessary to go a little bit cautiously when one's dealing with all sorts and kinds of people. And you quite quickly, as a teacher, begin to realize who is able to grapple with a bit more, and you give them a bit more. But yes, we teach. I hope, I'm sure we do at the LBC. I'm sure we do right from the start. We teach people that the Dhamma's fundamental teaching, anatta, praticca samutpada, conditionality. So we're teaching them the theory of spiritual death, but even the theory of spiritual death is going to have an effect. It will go a little bit deeper. But then I think that's backed up with this interaction with people who are really sort of asking you to be a bit more. And metta also is very important. When you really experience metta, you do transcend yourself to a small extent. I think metta is a way of, metta bhavana is a way of dying spiritually. If you take it far enough. Yes.
And just to go back to something you just said about if somebody's got a weak sense of identity, then this six element practice, for example, may be counterproductive. I don't know what the exact word you said, but I wondered if you could then say a little bit more about what Bhante has meant by building up a healthy individuality in a way.
Right.
Bante's use of the term the true individual seems at first glance to contradict something of the project of anatta, of spiritual death, individuality. And I know that for some people it can, initially at least, seem a bit confusing.
Yes.
I wonder if you could say something about thinking of ourselves as building our individuality,
Yes.
with letting it go.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the famous song of meditation, which says that we develop the self in order to go beyond the self.
Yeah.
Because it's the sense of oneself as a willing agent that leads the spiritual life.
Yeah.
We decide we're going to practice. We decide we're going to concentrate. We would decide we're going to develop metta. We even decide we're going to do a practice that leads to elimination of self. So you need a fairly high degree of integration of self, of self-identity. This fundamentally relates to the law of karma, because the law of karma teaches us that our willed action is what shapes our future world, as well as affecting the world around us. And it's the mechanism of our Dharma life up to the point of spiritual death. Through the practice of skillful action, which is willed action, intentional willed action, we get to the point where we can let go and something else begins to operate through us rather than will. Yes, so I think this is a very, very crucial understanding, and it's often used as a stick to beat the Buddhist with. You know, you're always talking about selflessness, and yet you make so much effort and so on. But I think it's a practical. It's easily resolved, practically speaking. Transcendence of self without a true self is not self-transcendence. It's merely retreat into babyhood.
Tempting times, but
yes, indeed. If only.
No, that's very helpful. And I'd like us to maybe we'll have to wait until after the break, but I'd like us to talk a little bit more about ordination, which in Sri Ratna in a way represents or introduces us to practices like the six element practice and represents a particular level of commitment to spiritual death. I wondered if you can say anything briefly now, and then maybe we'll have a break, about the significance of ordination for our Dharma lives, because sometimes people think, I've met people who think, okay, I don't want to join a club, as it were.
Sure.
And I'm quite happy to do it on my own.
Sure.
But there's something intrinsic about ordination, isn't there? And spiritual.
Yeah. Well, I suppose there's two separate questions. There's the question of doing it on your own and the question of ordination. And they do come together, because when you're ordained into an order.
Yes.
So we need to deal with those two slightly separately. They connect. But if you are to complete the project of the spiritual life, you need to commit yourself, because it's a conscious undertaking. It doesn't just happen. Of course, you may have experiences without any conscious deliberation. Traditional Buddhists would say that's to do with your past life, and it may well be. But if you are to really complete the project or even further the project, you need to consciously commit yourself. And that conscious commitment is what takes place at ordination. And the fact that it's witnessed by somebody else, like I witnessed your conscious commitment, makes it part of your identity. You know what I mean? So that it's not just a private thing. I remember Bhante used to talk about people from the very early days of Buddhism in Britain in the early 1960s who were proud that nobody at home or at work knew they were Buddhists. And they were really proud of that. But in a way, if it's not part of your conscious identity and your public identity, you haven't really fully completed the process of becoming a Buddhist. So you make it at ordination part of your public identity, and you have that affirmed by somebody you are confident is able to see that conscious commitment, that going for refuge to the three jewels. And of course, the other side of it, the entry into a community, is the giving up of your the separative individuality, separative individualism. You're joining a community, and in joining a community, you're relaxing your self attachment, because you have to accommodate others. And I think it's especially important in the modern world where people's lives are intensely privatized, and they've dropped out of community to a very substantial degree. So I think and that then accentuates separative selfhood, which is what needs to be gone beyond.
No, that's very helpful. Maybe we'll come back to that, but I think it's probably time that we have a short little break.
Okay.
So let's take a 5-minute break and come back at 7:46, so 7:51, and we'll start again then. Thank you, Subhuti. So we're just waiting for Subhuti. Hopefully Subhuti will be back. Hopefully, oh, there he is. There he is. Welcome back, Subhuti. And so, yeah, to those of you watching at home, you can, if you have got questions, or even if you haven't got questions, start thinking about questions. And if you have, you could, if you want to, start putting them in the chat. I'm going to ask Subhuti a few more things, and then in about 15 minutes or so, we'll see if we've got questions that we can turn to. If not, I'll just carry on asking Subhuti more things. And I'm sure
I might ask you some questions.
no, it's one way around. So very good. So Subhuti, we just started touching on ordination and the commitment of ordination, which involves a commitment to spiritual death, to realizing spiritual death. But I wondered if you could say a little bit more about how does an order member commit to that? I mean, what does it mean in practice in an order member's life, and why is it important somehow that? Well, you touched on this, but I wonder if you can say more about what the order is as a because if one's not ordained, it might be a bit mysterious as to what the order is. So two questions there, but are they linked in terms of what order members do and what the order is? At least ideally, let's talk ideally about how an ideal order member would be committing to realizing real spiritual death. What would you be doing?
Yes. Well, the first thing is that as an order member, you are beginning to do, and in fact, before you're ordained, you'll begin to do this. You'll be doing a practice, at least one practice, that a meditation practice, that is intended to bring about a deepening of spiritual death. So in terms of your practice, you will be activating that meditation. And of course, we're also committed to spiritual rebirth, but more of that tomorrow. But before you engage with spiritual rebirth, you do an aspect of the practice that engages with spiritual death. So yes, at the level of practice, your meditation practice, you're doing that. But it should go further than that. Of course, even the fact that you change your name does make a big difference. You are dying to your old self. And I remember this very strongly myself. But once I'd been given my new name, my old name just didn't seem to refer to me. And I've got used to it now, and I use it when I need to. But to begin with, it seemed alien. The new name immediately seemed like my name. So that's an emblem, a metaphor, or even an expression of dying to your old self. But of course, it's not a one-off process. This death needs to go on a moment-by-moment basis, and more deeply. So, as an order member, really any serious practitioner of the Dhamma should be trying to apply the Dhamma in this sense to their everyday experience. They should be trying to see that they should be letting go of selves. They should be breaking through views. They should be leaving behind old constructions of reality. And personally, very familiar with this. That you come to a sort of compromise with reality. You come to a certain construction of reality, and that sort of suits you, and it works. But at a certain point, it breaks down. This happens to everybody. But as an order member, as a committed Buddhist, what you try to do is recognize that breaking down isn't something unfortunate that's gone wrong. It's actually the breaking down of something limited, which opens up to something more vast and expansive. So there should be a constant effort to break free from self-identities. I remember Sangharakshita once saying that he thought actually we should have a new name every day. But he thought it was rather inconvenient. But
Our email IDs and our passwords.
yes, but yes, that's what you're committed to. You're committed to making sure you do not rest in any particular compromise with reality,
Yeah,
any settled position. And of course you do, but reality itself will challenge you, will defy you, and
yeah,
then your duty is to respond to that
mm,
with a going beyond.
mm. I'm
So,
beginning to wish I hadn't asked, but anyway, go on.
sorry.
I'm beginning to wish I hadn't asked.
Yeah. Well, it is quite interesting, as you know, you ceased to be chair, didn't you, of the LBC sometime
A bit more than 2 years ago. Yeah.
3 years ago. And I remember when I ceased to be chair of the LBC, probably I was a lot younger and a lot more immature than you, but I remember realizing after I'd given it up that I'd become identified with it, and that in the giving it up, I was a bit uncomfortable, even though I was also a bit freed, because I'd come to the point where I wanted to give it up, but still it had become part of my identity. So we're constantly having to break free from the constructions of identity.
I can no longer get people to insist that people call me Chairman Jnanavaca.
And bring you cups of tea and all that sort of stuff. Yes.
I try still. And,
you try, but it doesn't work, does it, anymore? Yeah. Well, fortunately, one has friends who defy these identities.
Well,
and again, that is interesting that the spiritual friendship, I think one of its functions is to challenge the boundary, challenge the constructed self-identity, not challenged by saying you must get rid of your self-identity, but just relating to you in a way that does not observe that self-identity, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
The real friend doesn't observe your little pretensions and breaks through them, hopefully gently and kindly, and so on and so forth. Maybe not even aware that that's what they're doing. So that's again one of the functions of a spiritual community. We're coming into a close enough connection with each other that these constructed identities, the way I'm putting it, get challenged and broken down.
Well, that's interesting. That sort of leads me on to asking. I mean, I'm thinking of, what would you say to somebody who was thinking of asking for ordination but wasn't sure whether that was the right thing to do? Particularly when, if you look online, there are lots of Buddhist teachings and teachers who will be teaching meditation practices, possibly giving discourses, whatever, that are spiritual death practices. And there's there's so many options now. What would you say to somebody who is considering whether they should join the order or ask for ordination, as opposed to why not follow somebody online, teacher X, who will teach them some spiritual death practice?
Right. I think that any teacher who is really taking people anywhere will bring them into some kind of relationship with each other. In other words, will form sangha. I think that's the natural function of a teacher, and that they will not be merely relating to them individually, personally, that all the relationship will not be just with them. So you don't have to join our order, but please do join a sangha where there's real engagement between people at the horizontal level. Because otherwise what's happening, and I think this is a sad phenomenon of our time, that Buddhism is becoming assimilated to Western individualism. Interestingly, you and I had some talk about this in relation to your exploration of McGilchrist's ideas, and I won't explain it all, but I think there's increasingly what I call left brain Buddhism. It's Buddhism for just one aspect of the mind. And, I think this is not really Buddhism. So you can do all these practices, you can learn all these practices, you can get something from them, but unless you come into a more vivid and engaging and deep connection with other people.
Yeah.
It's merely a refinement of your individualism.
Yeah.
It's just another consumer object.
Even if there's some sort of realization of spiritual death, would you say?
Yes, I think it's not so hard to have some degree of realization of spiritual death. I
Right.
think it's relatively common, actually,
Right.
some
Right.
degree. I
Yeah.
don't say a stabilized
Yeah.
realization. I think that is much harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think one of the problems is that you get teachers, and some of them I've listened to online or whatever. I'm convinced. I think they have had some experience, but
Yeah.
I don't get the feeling that it's absorbed. It's
Yeah.
too
Sure.
narrow. It's too one-sided. There isn't the breadth, which is why we're talking in terms of the 5 aspects,
Yeah.
because that produces a rounded growth.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
oddly, you can have a really intense and even deep realization, but it's like a pyramid without any base.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to stand upon,
Yeah.
and unless it's rounded out, unless it's broadened,
Yeah.
I think it can then become actually problematic,
Yeah.
because it becomes assimilated to an unresolved selfhood, an unresolved personality.
Part of our ego identity.
It becomes part of the ego identity. Even though there's a real experience beyond it, it becomes part of the ego identity.
Yeah.
So I think that I of course believe that this order is a very good one, although I know all its faults, mainly because I look at it in the mirror when I shave. But I believe it's a very good. I believe it's a good enough order.
Right.
Let's put it that way. It's a good enough order.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't say it's the only one, or who knows the best. I don't know how you compare them.
Sure.
But so I don't say join our order, although if you want to, please do. But join an order or a sangha, join a real community.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you will be simply getting, in the spiritual supermarket, pleasant experiences, even meaningful experiences, which will not create a rounded development.
Yeah.
And can become even problematic.
Yeah.
The arrogance of some people who've had insight is appalling. I've encountered this all the way through my time in the Dhamma. People who think they've had insight, and they can be so arrogant and snooty and so on. And it's a prima facie sign of the limitations. I don't say they haven't seen something.
Yeah.
But it's unassimilated. And
Yeah.
I'd sort of rather somebody who was fairly plain and ordinary and hadn't seen anything, but was progressing in a quite rounded way. But nowadays, that's not really possible to predict. You get it much more in India. But here, people are because of the distorting effect of our culture, which privileges a certain aspect of mental functioning and of human functioning.
Yeah.
And we just don't want Buddhism to play into that.
Yeah. 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 Yes, it seems a real danger in a modern Western Buddhism.
Yes. Yes.
And the order is a real sort of it mitigates against. It's not guaranteed, but it mitigates against this individualism.
Yes, it doesn't. It's not guaranteed because, of course, we're all unfinished individuals, if you see what I mean. And unfinished individuals can get themselves into terrible messes. We have done in the past. But if you a fool who persists in his folly will become wise, there's some truth in that. That if you keep going and keep making the effort and keep connecting with the Dhamma, and particularly if you have a very able teacher, then yes, I've no doubt that a rounded individuality will develop, just as I've seen a rounded community developing in our movement generally at the LBC.
Yeah.
It's so much more broad and round and deep and many-sided than it ever used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Spiritual life is not about just these experiences.
Yeah, well, that's kind of key. I wanted to ask about experience and non-experience. Bante's
Yes.
seminal kind of lecture of enlightenment as experience and non-experience,
Yeah.
and particularly around spiritual death, this issue of experience.
Yes.
In terms of when we're talking about integration or skillful intention or spiritual, people aren't going to be so. Well, I don't think people get so hung up. We don't get so hung up on experience.
Yes.
I know that one can feel more metaphor sometimes and less metaphor sometimes, but
Yeah.
it's unlikely that we hold on to that as part of our identity.
Yeah.
With spiritual death, there does seem to be a tension because, in a way, realization is emphasized. And
Yeah.
how are we to talk about realization if not as an experience? And yet, the language of experience is problematic. I wondered if you could say something about experience and non-experience in relation to spiritual death.
Yeah, I think that again, it's part of the Western cultural emphasis that the experience of insight has been very much stressed, and there are practices, techniques that are very much directed towards bringing somebody to an experience. But the impression I've had, and certainly this is what Bhante taught, that actually if somebody is simply engaging with a rounded spiritual life, they may not notice that they've passed a certain point. He said, if you just keep practicing, and of course that includes reflecting on non-selfhood, you may never have that big breakthrough moment when you suddenly think, bang, all the oranges in a row or whatever it is on this fruit machine, and the money pours out. It may not happen. In fact, I suspect that that's relatively rare. And I suspect mainly when people have those sort of intense experiences, it's the product of something rather forcible, and of not necessarily of no value, but of only relative value. And that many people will just engage with the Dhamma life. They'll do their meditation, they'll do their friendship, they'll work together with others if they can. They'll just get on with it. They'll be moral, and at a certain point will be passed without anybody noticing it. No bells will ring. There'll be no announcements in the personal columns of the Times, and that sort of thing. So I think we really need to get away from the idea of looking for an experience. We may have experiences, but don't get hung up on them. Experiences come and experiences go. The main thing is the steady progress of one's overall personality, all 5 aspects moving along together. So I think that's really quite important. And I remember Bhante saying that of a Dhammacharini. He said, well, she's just very, very faithful. She just practices very, very systematically. And he said that it's hard to imagine her without the Dhamma. Then he said, maybe that is stream entry. Maybe that is spiritual death. So you just almost imperceptibly see changes in people, and you may not even notice them in yourself. But a point may come where your understanding is much more fluid. You're less and less caught up. You're less and less caught out. You're much more in tune with other people, and maybe you've done it.
And presumably there would be a lessening of dukkha, of suffering.
There'll be a lessening of suffering. Yes, there'll be a lessening of suffering and a greater degree of joy.
And freedom.
One would expect somebody who had that sort of attainment, I was going to say, but I don't want to say that, had gone through those sort of processes. You'd expect them to have a certain brightness to them. And that's what, I recently encountered a number of people who think they've got insight and attain this level and that level and the next level. But to be honest, they just don't seem like it. There doesn't seem to be anything of any sort of brightness about them. It seems to be largely intellectual.
Right.
Which isn't to say that they haven't actually had an experience.
Yeah.
But I think the experience is of only relative importance.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. No, well, thank you. Thanks very much, Subhuti.
I do think that exploration you've been doing with McGilchrist is so important. I'd like to see
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
applied much more to
Mm.
thinking about these issues, because I think it's extremely helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're watching at home, Maitra Bandhu and I, well, some of you will know, interviewed Ian McGilchrist, who's a psychiatrist and a writer and a thinker, and well, a polymath, really, a wonderful thinker. And those interviews are online if you want to look at it. But yes, you in a way coined this frame. Well, he's talked about left and right hemispheres. We haven't got time to go into his theories and thesis, but left-brained spiritual death is a potential coin. Yeah. Okay. Shall we see if there are any questions from our audience? So let's have a quick look. So Eloise says, is that right? Hopefully I've pronounced you right. How can being alone loosen our sense of self? So I guess this is a little bit in contrast to what you've been saying about needing community, about needing Sangha. So how can being alone loosen our sense of self?
Yes. I should say that when one emphasizes community, one doesn't want to mean that, or suggest that one should always be with other people. That can be a problem in itself. And we are encouraged to spend, well, actually a month each year in solitary retreat. Not so many of us do that, but some do. So the solitary retreat is a sort of counterbalance to the engagement with people in community. And partly the effect is to throw you back on your own experience. So particularly what you may find is that you realize you've been motivated mainly by other people. And so when you're on your own, you find your own motivation. But of course, also when you're on your own, if you're able to really be on your own, you're lessening input. You're in a situation where you're less subject to external influence and input, and that allows a space to open up. We talked about space yesterday, this space that opens up, and within that space, you can discover something much deeper, much deeper within yourself, as it were. It's something within yourself that's not really within yourself. It's beyond yourself. So I think that solitude is a very, very important aspect of a full spiritual life, just as engagement with a community is extremely important. In a way, you can't have the one without the other. You can't be alone. You can't be with others. And the experience of aloneness is different from the experience of loneliness. Aloneness is a feeling of great contentment, and curiously, you can feel very strongly and deeply linked to others. I think that, you know, to quickly pick one feature of that aloneness, it's this ability for an inner silence to develop. And with very little input, and in that inner silence, you discover something more, or something more emerges, and something that may be quite new to you. Probably will be quite new to you. Quite wonderful.
It's not an emptiness in a sense of a complete annihilation.
No.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Subhuti. So Simon Chinnery asked,
Simon Chinnery, I know that name.
Is there a link between cultivating spiritual receptivity and developing faith, and letting go of views that get in the way of true reality?
So a link between
spiritual receptivity and developing faith.
Yes.
Letting go of views that get in the way of reality.
Yes. I think I think he's getting at something, and I think I see what he's getting at. Yes, I think when you do experience faith, when you experience faith, you're connecting with what goes beyond self.
Mm, mm, mm,
Bantes talks of it as what is ultimate in you responding to what is ultimate in the universe. It's absolutely memorable definition. And so when you really experience faith in that sense, you get out of the way.
yeah,
If you're in the way,
yeah,
then no faith,
yeah,
because it's all about me.
yeah,
And like it's like bowing in front of the Buddha, and all the time you're thinking, oh, how well I'm bowing, rather than just feeling devotion to the Buddha and an appreciation of who the Buddha is. And you've got to bow.
yeah,
So yes, I think a genuine faith, and when I say genuine faith, I mean a faith in something that is transcendent,
yeah,
transcendent of self, not
yeah,
merely appreciation and admiration and so on, but a real reaching to something beyond self. I think that immediately takes away that layer of self and of the views that support
mm,
self and that emerge from self
yeah,
immediately. Of course, the problem is that if you still have those views, they may then appropriate
mm,
the faith,
mm, mm,
if you see what I mean. This is always the problem,
mm,
that there's no way of just brushing through it,
mm, mm,
because what happens is that it simply reasserts itself. So
yeah,
your ideas may take hold of that moment of intense faith and sort of put it to poor use.
yeah,
Uh, I think this is quite common that, for instance, when you first engage with a spiritual community, there's a genuine response of faith to what is that spiritual community is gathered around, but sometimes that's a little credulous in relation to some of the people, which is to do with your own lack of individuality, if you
mm,
see what I mean. I speak from personal experience,
mm,
you need therefore to uh, work on yourself so that your views do not then take hold of your faith and manipulate it in some way. That's the problem, that unresolved individuality, unresolved views become manipulative.
you can see as you talk, well, I can see anyway, that hopefully people can see that the five essentials, as we're calling them, these aspects, or you can think of them as vertical stages, you can't
Yeah.
really have, you can't leave any of them out. They're completely
No.
inextricably linked. And it's
Yes.
because we have to talk about them sequentially. I mean, all throughout this evening, I've had to sort of consciously avoid steering you towards spiritual rebirth, because it's
Right. Yes.
sort of
Yes.
difficult to talk about spiritual death
Yes.
without spiritual rebirth.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
a way, you need the whole thing, don't you?
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think this is one of the principal things that we need to grasp, and that's why I'm so impressed by what McGilchrist has to say about the way the brain works and its
yeah,
effect in culture. I think it's exactly what we're talking about. This
yeah,
harmony of the even the neurological system, which
yeah,
represents a harmony of approach,
yeah,
which is the only one you can really have to a successful spiritual life.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah. To a successful human life as well,
mm.
as well. So, thank you. So, who have we got? Oliver Matthias says, how do we disidentify from the body? How do you disidentify from your body?
Yes, very carefully.
Very slowly.
Well, a disidentification from the body can be a rather pernicious phrase, if you see what I mean.
Hmm.
Um, and particularly in the West, spiritual traditions tend to have a bit of a downer on the body.
Hmm.
Um, so
Hmm.
in the Buddhist tradition, it's not so much a question of disidentifying from the body, but well, yes, if you take that quite carefully. But the Buddha spoke of the body as uh, to be cared for,
Hmm.
but not to be attached to. It's a vehicle for your realization, this precious human life.
Mm.
In later tradition, one was encouraged to think of the body as the vehicle for the Buddha,
Mm.
if you like.
Mm.
So perhaps actually, if one starts to look at the body more as a blessed opportunity,
Mm.
rather than as a cursed ball and chain that's dragging you back,
Mm.
that would be a better way of thinking.
Mm.
Think, it's wonderful I have a body. It's
Mm.
wonderful that my body has a degree of health.
Mm.
Even if I've got sickness, well, that's not entire, as it were. And even the sickness may be teaching me lessons.
Mm.
But this body is something remarkable, because it's in this body that I'm able to practice the Dhamma.
Mm.
So I'd suggest not so much disidentifying from the body, because that could lead to simple alienation.
Yeah.
And that is quite a common phenomenon.
Yeah, particularly in religious
groups. Yeah. Yes.
you know.
Interestingly, talking to an acupuncturist recently, she was saying that people often come to her with views about the body, either materialist views, I mentioned this the other day, that suggest that you just take a pill and it's all solved, not taking into account the mental factors that lie behind health. And on the other hand, rather sort of dismissive of the body, thinking the body is low and inferior, not taking it seriously, not even in a way you could say loving it. But I think, yes, it's a question really of understanding the true place of the body in our spiritual life, and having a healthy and proper relationship to it. I think I know what the questioner meant by disidentifying, but I'd be wary of that language. But yes, through mindfulness, you are aware of the body, but not sort of hung up on it. But I think the fundamental point is to have a more healthy attitude to the body.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. We've got time probably for one more, so maybe this is a good one. It's Hobdabob asking Subhuti. Hobdabob says, obviously you've been practicing for a long time. Given that following the Dharma involves an engagement with views, do you have moments of doubt about your faith? Do you have moments of doubt about your faith?
Not for many years. I don't have doubt in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Not for many years have I had that doubt. I've doubt in myself. I've doubt sometimes. 20 years ago, I had severe doubts in my teacher, but I've never had doubt. And not for many years have I had doubt in the Dhamma. It's to me a matter of direct experience. I don't thereby say I've attained anything, but I know from my own experience this is the truth of things.
And what a freedom there must be in that lack of conflict.
Yes.
Knowing what we're doing with your life is oriented towards the truth.
Yes. Well, I had this period about 20 years ago when I did have severe doubts about Sangharakshita, for the reasons that we all know about. In the course of that, which was very, very painful to me, very painful indeed. But in the course of it, I suddenly realized that there was something I had absolutely no doubt about. I had absolutely no doubt. And I tried to have doubt almost just as an exercise in the Buddha's attainment. I had no doubt in his Dhamma. And from that, I was then able to put Sangharakshita back in his rightful place, because it's he that has given me the Buddha, if you like. It's he that has taught me how to practice, given me a practicable way of living, and has created a Sangha in which I can practice. So yes, I haven't for many years had that doubt, and it's sort of hubristic to say this kind of thing out loud. And I did have a moment of doubt as to whether I should say it.
Oh, I wanted you to say it. I asked the question because I think it's helpful. It sort of gives people confidence. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think actually, dare I say it, I don't think since I encountered the Dhamma that I've ever doubted it. I encountered it as a quite young man at 22, I think 21 or 22. And I immediately recognized it was the truth. And I immediately recognized the Buddha was the one who'd realized that truth. And that has never wavered.
Well, thank you very much, Subhuti, for,
Yeah.
in a way, ending on that note. One of the effects, I think, of hearing you speak, well, whenever I engage with you, whether it's one-to-one or listening to your talks, it strengthens my shraddha, my faith. And in a way, faith has to be caught, doesn't it? In a certain sense from each other. So I just want to say a very, very hearty, heartfelt thank you to you, Subhuti, for this evening and for the whole week of interviews and meditation leading, and then more generally for what you're offering to the LBC, what you give to the LBC so unstintingly. It's invaluable for all of us in the Sangha. And then in this particular COVID era, our Sangha has, one of the benefits is that it's expanded,
Yes.
so that people tune in live from all over the world. So I want to just say thank you if you have tuned in tonight. And well, I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. I hope you found it as stimulating as I have, as encouraging as I have. And once again, thank you very much, Subhuti. We're going to finish with, as we have been, with reciting the transference of merit and self-surrender. So because we've got people here, we'll do that in call and response. I think that will work. So let's just pause for a moment or so. The transference of merit and self-surrender. May the merit gained in my acting thus go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings. My personality throughout my existences. My possessions. And my merit in all three ways. I give up without regard to myself. For the benefit of all beings. Just as the earth and other elements. Are serviceable in many ways. To the infinite number of beings. Inhabiting limitless space. So may I become. That which maintains all beings. Situated throughout space. So long as all have not attained. To peace. Very good. So thank you all very much, and hopefully see you again very soon. Thank you. Good night. Good night to Subhuti.
Good night.